Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Dirshu Berurah share. Today's daf in the Dirshu Berurah is Berurah Chelik Hey Kuf Hey Amid Beis. However, we are holding on Kuf Hey Amid Aleph. I hope to make up the lost page over the next couple of days. So we find ourselves today in Siman Tov Tzadik Zayin. We're near the end of Siv Hey. We are on Kuf Hey Amid Aleph. We're up to Berurah Ois Katan Yud Daled. I'm just going to read the words of the Mechaber in Sif Hey once again, so that we know the topic that we're discussing. So the Mechaber had said in Sif Hey, we're talking about somebody who has a channel of water that runs through his chutzner. And the Mechaber said, Im Sachar Amas Hamayim, if somebody plugs up the channel of water that he has running through his chutzner, Baknisa ubayitzia, both at the point where the channel of water enters the chutzner and at the point where it exits the chutzner. May Erev Yom Tov, he plugs up these two openings on Erev Yom Tov. Mutar likach mimena dogim b'Yom Tov, he's now allowed to take fish from this channel of water on Yom Tov. Tahavalei nitzaydin v'oimdin, because these fish are considered to be already trapped. There's no problem with tzeda over here. And as the Ramah explains in the parentheses here, since this channel of water is small and narrow, so the fish don't really have anywhere to escape. Again, the entrance point of this channel in the chutzner is plugged up. The exit point of this channel is plugged up. There's nowhere for the fish to go. As the Ramah says, we're talking, and the Mishnah Berurah is going to expand upon it, we're talking about a narrow channel. There's really nowhere for the fish to escape, so the fish are considered to be already trapped. They're not mechusar tzeda. They're nitzaydin v'oimdin. They're already trapped. And as far as muktzah, according to the Mechaber, we have a potential muktzah problem here, but as far as muktzah is concerned, the act of plugging up the opening and the exit of the channel of water, that's an act of hachana. He prepared those fish for Yom Tov use. So there's no muktzah problem and there's no tzeda problem. Now let's take a look at Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Yud Daled. The Ramah had said that the channel of water that we're discussing, hitzara, it's small, it's narrow. Ayin babach, the Chavetz Chaim tells us, take a look at the words of the Bach, u'sha'arei achrayim, as well as other achrayim, shekasvu, who write, de'imhi rechava yoser min shisha tvachim asur. If this channel of water would be more than 6 tvachim across, then it would be asur to catch these fish, because now suddenly we look at the fish as being mechusar tzeda. If we're talking about something that's more than 6 tvachim across, so now the fish could dart this way and that way. Now it's mechusar tzeda, and you have a tzeda problem. Or le'inyan arucha, as far as the length of the channel of water, mekilin harbe achrayim, many achrayim rule leniently, afilu im arucha kama, even if the channel of water is quite long, keven she'ena rechava, since it's not very wide, bekal yesh litvais hadogim, it's very easy to capture the fish. Va'afilu ba'ofen hamuter gam kein, va'afilu ba'ofen hamuter, even in cases where it's mutter to catch the fish, gam kein yesh machmirim shalai l'tzaydan b'mitzuda kedar sh'aisin b'chayil, there are those that are machmir. He brings this down from the Pri Chadash, the Graz, the Taz, the Pri Chadash and the Graz, who are machmir, and they say that while it's mutter to catch the fish, you cannot catch them with a net, kedar sh'aisin b'chayil, the way it would be done during the week, elo b'yad, rather it should be done with a shinoi, it should be done by hand and not with a net. V'yesh lachush l'sfar zu l'chatchila, and the Chavetz Chaim says that l'chatchila, we should be concerned with this opinion, and we should not do it the way it's done b'chayil. V'lav davka amas hamayim, the Chavetz Chaim continues, and he says this halacha pertains not only to a channel of water, elahu hadin, the same halacha would apply, imihichnis dagim l'teva malaya nikavim. Let's say you had some fish that you want to use on Yom Tov. What you did was, you took a box, you took some kind of container, and you put a hole, you made holes in the container, so that when you lower it into the water, the box fills up with water, and now you can isolate fish inside this box. The box is nice and full of water, but the fish can't get anywhere because they're trapped in this box within the Amas Hamayim. So he says, this halacha would apply to such a box as well. V'ha'amida b'mayim, you took this box that has holes in it and you inserted it into the water, and I guess the walls of the box are higher than the water, so the fish can't escape anywhere. They're in the box. Nami shaychi kalhani dini, these halachas would also apply. If it's small and it's easy to catch the fish, well, the fish are muchan, by virtue of the fact that you trapped the fish before Yom Tov inside this box, so the fish certainly are not muktzah, they're muchan, and they're also not mechusar tzeda if we're talking about a small box. V'yesh mishaymer, there are those that say the dafka b'bibaru b'amas hamayim, that this halacha pertains to some kind of a small fish pond or a small channel, shal kol panim adogim heim b'karka mekayim chayusam, where the fish that are in a fish pond, it's a little man-made depression in the ground that's full of water, you have a little pond, or if it's an amas hamayim, it's a channel of water in the ground, the fish are located in their natural habitat. However, once you put them in some sort of a box, then we have shittas that hold that the halacha of tzeda doesn't apply anymore at all, because they're not in their natural habitat. They're essentially already trapped. And therefore, even if this box that you have that has the fish in it is large enough so that you would need to go get a net in order to catch the fish, it would still be mutter, because these fish are not mechusar tzeda. They're already removed from their natural habitat. Therefore, the Chavetz Chaim says, since we do have this opinion, he says there's reason to be machmir when you have the fish in a box, that you should have to go b'dafka and catch the fish with your hand as opposed to using a net. Even if we're talking about a large box that's considerably more than 6 tvachim across. Let's say you take fish and you put them into some kind of a well before Yom Tov. So before Yom Tov begins, you caught these fish and now you put them into a be'er, you put them into a well. But this well is large enough that if you want to trap the fish, you're going to have to use some kind of trap, some kind of keli. You're not allowed to catch them on Yom Tov because they're mechusar tzeda. However, let's say you put the fish into a deep well, but it's a deep, narrow well. And really, if you measure by the size of the well itself, if you had the ability to go down to the level of the water, you would not need a keli to catch these fish. It's a very small well, so really you'd be able to just chop the fish with your hands. The problem is you can't do it because the water level is 20 feet down and you're all the way up there. So therefore you need to lower a bucket and you need to catch the fish using a bucket. Is that considered that the fish are mechusar tzeda because you need a keli? Or do we look at it and say they're not really mechusar tzeda? Really, where they are, it would be very easy to catch them if you could get there. The problem is that you can't get there. You don't need the bucket in order to trap the fish because the fish are mechusar tzeda. They have a large area to swim away to. That's not the problem. The problem is you need a bucket because you need to get down to the water level. So over there, the Chavetz Chaim says, Ein tzarich leired lamata kedei l'tafsan b'yadai. Over there, we don't say that you got to get down to the water level so that you should be able to trap the fish with your hands. Rather, you could stay up above and you could use a bucket, you could use a keli to trap them. Okay, now we turn to Sivav, top line of Kuf Hey Amud Aleph. Says the Mechaber, Avozim are geese, V'tarnegolim, or chickens, V'yonim, or doves, Shababayis, that are domesticated. And we have to remember that back in the days of yore, it was commonplace to have domesticated animals actually living in the house, or at least part-time, spending time in the house. So, says the Mechaber, if you have geese, or you have chickens, or you have these doves, shababayis, that are raised in the house, or they went out to the yard, and we're talking about livestock. That is the reason you're raising them, is you're raising them for achila. You have geese, you have chicks, you have hens, you have doves that you're raising for achila. Mutter letzudan, you're allowed to trap them, ve'enon tzrichim zimun, and they do not require any act to make them min hamuchan. You don't have to do anything to designate them for Yom Tov use. They're considered already designated for Yom Tov use. So let's take a look before we even go into the Mishnah Berurah. Let's take a look at the Biur Halacha Dibra Maschal Avozim V'Tarnagolim. Says the Chavetz Chaim, we're not only talking about geese and chickens over here. The same halacha would apply to other fowl that are domesticated. This is the key point. And they return to their coop in the evening. I know from chickens because I've had chickens. I have hens right now in my backyard. You could open up the coop, you could open up the run, and you can let them run all over your property. And you just prop the door to the coop or the door to the run open. And around Shkia time, they're all going to come running back to the coop. And we're going to see, the Mishnah Berurah is going to mention this later, and I see it all the time. The truth is that these kind of fowl, I don't know if you ever heard the term of chicken blindness, but they are blind. They're relatively blind at night. Once it gets dark, they can't see. And therefore, when it starts to get dark, they need to feel safe. They run back to the coop. They know where home is. They run back to the coop. They climb in. They go up on their roost, and they stay there. So these kind of animals that come back to their coop all the time, that's what kluvan. Kluvan means their coop. Shein b'nei tarbus, they're domesticated. Uban lekluvan, they return to their coop. La'erev in the evening. Umezayna'isan alecha, and they also return to the coop because they're dependent on you for their food. It's true that they go running all over the yard and they spend their day pecking and scratching and seeing what they could find, but that's not their main source of nourishment. Their main source of nourishment is the food that you provide them with. So they're always going to come back. Havalei kinitzaydin, these type of animals are considered nitzayd va'imid. They're not mechusar tzeda. Why they're mechusar tzeda? Even if they're out somewhere running right now, I don't have to go catch them. I'll just wait a few hours. They're going to come home. They're going to go into the coop. I pick them up. So they're not, these, says the Mechaber, that these are not considered mechusar tzeda. Now let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. It's cut in Tezvav. The Mechaber referred to these fowl as being shababayis. What does that mean? What the Mechaber means to say is shegedelin babayis. They are raised in the house. They're fully domesticated. They even spend time inside the house, or at least in your backyard. And these are fowl that you're raising for food. However, if the reason you're raising them, let's say you had hens that you're raising for eggs, so then we have a problem. Then, according to the Shita of the Mechaber that we had earlier in Siman Taf Tzadikei in Siv Daled, I'll just remind you, the Mechaber said then there are types of muktzah that were makel on Shabbos. For instance, an egg-laying hen would be livestock, live animals muktzah even on Shabbos. But there are things that are muktzah. Let's see back in Taf Tzadikei, the examples that we had here. This was Taf Tzadikei, Siv Daled, in the Mishnah Berurah is cut in Tezvav. Right? Let's say, here's a primary example that we used then. Let's say you have apples that you set aside for schera. You have sacks of apples. You're in the produce business. So you have sacks of apples that you set aside for sale. Even though those apples are eminently edible, but there's a certain concept of muktzah on those apples, because are they really muchan for Shabbos use, for Yom Tov use? Not really. You really set them aside for schera. So we know that on Shabbos we're makel. On Shabbos, we would say that those apples are not muktzah. We would consider them min hamuchan, because if you get a real taiva for an apple on Shabbos afternoon, you'll open up a sack and you'll take an apple. But on Yom Tov, the sheet of the Mechaber is that on Yom Tov we're machmir on that kind of muktzah. And the Mishnah Berurah explained back in Taf Tzadikei, the reason we're machmir on Yom Tov is since Yom Tov is already more kuladik than Shabbos. So we're afraid if we're going to be makel on this type of muktzah on Yom Tov, people are going to come to be makel in more ways on Yom Tov. So on Shabbos we could be makel. On Yom Tov we can't be makel. That was the shita of the Mechaber. So the Mishnah Berurah is telling us over here. That if you have these hens that you're using for eggs, so then laman da oisa muktzah b'Yom Tov, according to the shita of the Mechaber back in Taf Tzadikei, that we're machmer on muktzah on Yom Tov, so then these hens would be muktzah. because they're not really muchan. You don't have your das on them for oichel nefesh, for eating them. You have them to have eggs. So it's not really muchan for shechting and for eating on Yom Tov. So that's why the Chavetz Chaim is pointing out over here. That's why the Mechaber l'shitasai, he says over here that the only time these fowl are mutter is if they're ha'oimdim la'achila. If they're oimdim la'achila, then they're mutter. Continues the Chavetz Chaim here, a nice cut in Tezayin. Ve'im kana oifais elu. Let's say you purchased some hens, v'loy chashav klal le'ezeh davar ya'amiden. And you really didn't think about it. You really didn't think, do I want these hens for eggs or am I going to use them as a food source? Mutarim, then the default position is that they're mutter, testamayu la'achila, because the default position is that la'achila kaimi, that they're there for food purposes. Ais Kantan Yud Zayin, the Mechaber says mutter l'tzaidan, these kind of fowl, it's mutter to trap them. Va'afilu me'rishas harabim, these kind of domesticated fowl, you're allowed to catch them even if they left your property. So they left your house, they left the coop, they left your yard, they went out into Rishus Harabim. I mean, I'll tell you just a quick funny one. You know, when I lived in Edison and we had hens in the backyard, we were buying the house here in Staten Island, and my wife and I came out to Staten Island to check out something at the house here in Staten Island, and there was nobody home in Edison. And we got a phone call from a neighbor. She says, my wife got the phone call, Mrs. Weiss, there are 5 chickens walking down Lexington Avenue. Are those yours? And my wife said, let me tell you, if there are 5 chickens walking down Lexington Avenue, yes, they're mine. So the neighbor asked, is there anything that we can do? So my wife said, listen, you don't have to bother with them. They'll probably go home by themselves. But if you're worried, you know, if you have time and you don't mind doing it, if you have some oatmeal in the house, just take some raw oatmeal and go over to them and drop some oatmeal and make a track going back to the house, and they'll follow the oatmeal and they'll go into the yard and close the gate. Somebody must have left the gate open. So I remember I told my wife then, if that would happen here in Staten Island, if there would be 5 chickens walking down Amboy Road, it would be on the front page of the Staten Island Advance the next day. It would be chickens walking down the road on Amboy Avenue, and on Amboy Road. Anyway, okay. So the halacha over here is you're allowed to trap these fowl, afilu mirishos harabim, even if they go out to rishos harabim, va'afilu tzarach lavi mitzuda, and even if you need a net or some other kind of trap in order to trap them, they're still not considered to be mechusar tzeda. Why not? Explains the Chavetz Chaim. The kaven debayin likluvan ba'erev, because since the nature of these fowl is that they're going to come back to their coop at night, and they count on you and they count on your house for their food. These are considered already trapped because they're not going anywhere. They're not escaping. They might be out Rishus Harabim right now, but they're coming back home. However, this is only true. This is a kula that we have on Yom Tov, that we're going to allow you to trap these fowl on Yom Tov, l'tzorech eichel nefesh on Yom Tov, v'yitiru misham simchas Yom Tov. Halavachi, but if this has nothing to do with Simchas Yom Tov, if it's Shabbos afternoon and you decide that you want to get your hens back into their coop and you want to go chase them and you want to trap them and get them into the coop, also Kama Paiskim, according to many Paiskim, that is prohibited. We saw this in the Ramah earlier in Hilchos Shabbos in Shin Tez Zayin, that there are those Paiskim that rule very stringently when it comes to Tzeda. And they say, even though these chickens or these geese are always going to come back to their coop, still, if they're out in a large area, you're not allowed to go trap them. The Achrayim write, another point, if this is a fowl that you just purchased, and he doesn't know his way around, he's not broken in yet, and he doesn't return back to his coop at night, maybe he doesn't know yet where his coop is, he hasn't established his place yet. Over there, you certainly would be chayav for tzeda if you trapped such a fowl on Shabbos. In the Mishnah Berurah, a new animal like that you wouldn't be allowed to trap even on Yom Tov, unless he happens to go into a small area. Chayyadam writes, and I alluded to this before, the Balayla, at night, Kishehen Yoshven al Hakira, when these fowl are sitting on their roost. A kana is a reed or a pole, and inside a chicken coop you make a roost. They automatically gravitate at night to the highest point in their coop, and hens have a pecking order. So the dominant hen will always go to the highest point. If you have more than one roost, the dominant hen or the dominant rooster is going to jump up to the highest roost and push everybody else off. Mutter l'tzudan. At night, you're allowed to trap them. Why? De'einehem misavrois us. Because like I said earlier, at night, they're blind. They can't see. Ve'einon nishmatan miyad ha'toifsan. And you could pick them up, you could trap them, and they won't leave your hand. At night, they are scared. I had once at night, I remember something happened, the door to the coop closed, and we were away, and the chickens couldn't get in to the coop at night. And I came home, and I found the door to the coop closed with no hens in it. So I went with a flashlight searching around, and I found, it was the middle of the winter, I found 5 hens huddled up together inside a basement window well, all cuddled up together for warmth. And I just picked them all up, and they came into my hands as calm as anything, and purring away. They were completely content and completely trusting because they can't see, and they know that they know that you're the owner, and they know that you're going to take care of them. So you pick them up and you take them to the coop and you put them on their roost, and they go on their roost and they go back to sleep. So even if during the day they'll run away, at night they're not running. So at night they're really nitzayid va'imid because at night they're blind. The Mechaber said, Zimun, these kind of fowl don't need any kind of act to make them min hamuchan. The muchanim because they're automatically min hamuchan. The kasra, they're oimdim la'achila, so that's what they are. They're min hamuchan. The kasra, the paiskim right to become makim. Nevertheless, Yirei Shamayim, a true Yirei Shamayim, yiteneinav betchila b'ha'oifais. He'll give a good look at the fowl beforehand, before Yom Tov. V'yivrar ezeh sheyirtzeh, and he'll select which one he wants for Yom Tov. Kedei shelo yavei lamachar litel lahaniach, so that on Yom Tov he shouldn't come and pick up one and put it back down. This one's not juicy enough, I'll take that one. V'afal pi shekulam muchanim heim, even though really meikar adin, all of these fowl that are oimdim la'achila are really all considered min hamuchan. Nevertheless, you're getting involved in a Terchi Yisera. You go, you're picking up each chicken, and I got to go chase this one and reach up for that one and decide, is this one juicier, is that one juicier? Don't do that. Select it before Yom Tov. That way on Yom Tov, you just walk in, pick it up, take it, check it, need it. Okay, we go to Sifkat and Zayin. So that's as far as domesticated geese, chickens, dove. Sha'ar kol chaya v'oif, other beasts, other wild animals or wild fowl, shemechusarim tzeda, that are lacking trapping. They're not domesticated, that they're considered nitzayid va'imid. They're not coming back to their coop. They don't have a coop. They wander around all over, and they're definitely mechusar tzeda. Shetzarich loymar havei mitzuda inutzudenu, so that if you wanted to trap these animals, you would have to say, okay, let's go get some traps, let's go get some nets, and let's catch some of these. Aser l'tzudan, you're not allowed to trap these on Yom Tov, and not only that, it's also aser l'ten l'fneim mizaynos. You're also not allowed to bring food to them, because we're afraid that if you feed them, you might come to trap them. V'chol she'ein mechusarim tzeda, any animals that are not mechusar tzeda, mutter l'tzudan v'liten l'fneim mizaynos, you're allowed to trap them, and therefore you're also allowed to feed them. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting your test. Shetzarich laimar avei mitzuda, animals that are mechusar tzeda, so that if you wanted to trap them, you would have to say, come, let's go bring some nets or traps. Ayin la'el siman shin tezayin, Mishnah Berurah sif cotton dalid, v'sham this buyer over there, the Shabbos, we explain, the chol she'ein yichelim lo tafsai beritza achas. What's considered? What's the measuring point? How do you know if an animal is considered mechusar tzeda? How much work does it have to take to catch an animal for it to be called mechusar tzeda? So over there, the Mishnah Berurah says that anything that you can't catch beritza achas, you go with one sprint, you could go catch it. Ela rather tzarich lihi nafesh kaidem shiyagienu. You're not going to be able to just run and catch it. You have to run and then see where it goes, stop a minute, and then plan. I'm going to go over there. I'm going to go over there. That's already considered mechusar tzeda. You know what's not considered mechusar tzeda? When you could just go, jump, sprint, and catch it. That's not mechusar tzeda. But if you have to go this way, stop, go that way, stop, this way, stop, that's already mechusar tzeda. That's as if it's already mechusar tzeda, as if you would have to say, go get me a trap. Well, and according to what we explained further over there in Hilchos Shabbos, when it comes to birds, even if the bird is in a small place, so that you would be able to catch it with one jump. But if there's an open window or an open trap in the ceiling, in the roof, so that the bird can escape over there, you're not allowed to trap it. Let's remember that these kind of animals and fowl, when we say you're allowed to trap them, that's only if they are muchan. That's if you designated them for Yom Tov use. But if not, then at least according to the Mechaber, they would be muktzah. Okay. Sivches. Ayol utzvi. A tzvi is a deer, and ayol is a gazelle, or maybe a young ram, some kind of goat. Ayol utzvi. Shekinenu bepardes. Kinenu means they're nesting. So I guess it means that this is where their home is. Shekinenu bepardes. They live in some kind of fenced-in orchard. V'yoldu bayafarim, and they gave birth to fawns. And the fawns are very small. They can't really run away, so that they're not mechusar tzeda. Mutarim b'loy zimun. You're allowed to catch them because they're not mechusar tzeda, and they're mutar without any achana. You don't have to do an act to designate them for Yom Tov use. They are considered already muchan. This is only true when you're dealing with animals that are living in a pardes, in an orchard that's close to the city. What's called close to the city? Besoich shivim amma, within 70 2/3 of an amma, the date alayu. So since they're close by, you have your das on them. You have in your mind that I might use them on Yom Tov because they're close by. But as far as the mother animal, who's an adult, even an act of hachana would not render the mother usable on Yom Tov, because the mother is a full-grown chaya that could go escape. So she's not mechuseres tzeda. So over there, there's a muktzah problem. Over there, there's a tzeda problem. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in Chav Aleph, back on Kofei Amud Aleph. Bepardes gador. We're talking about an orchard that's fenced in. Shu makom hamishtamer. It's a place that is guarded and is protected. And if you take a look at the Sharitzion, is cut in Aleph, he brings this down from Rashi in the Shitum Kubetzes, and he says the reason why we have to be talking about a pardes that's gador, about a fenced-in pardes, in order for it to be mutter. The Amloikein, says the Sharitzion, loy shayach daite alayu. If the pardes is not fenced in, so then how could you say that these fawns are considered muchan, that they're daite alayu, that your mind is on them to use them on Yom Tov? If the pardes is not fenced in, maybe they'll walk out of the pardes. So how are they mina muchan? So they're only mina muchan if the pardes is fenced in. I skipped. Let's go back. Chaf Aleph, Bepardes Gador. We're talking about a fenced-in orchard. Shumakar Mamishtaber. She'ein Avlad Yochalotzes Misham, so that he can't go out. The fawn can't escape. The Kal Lutzudai, and it's easy to trap him. So he's both not mechusar tzeda, and it's also not muktzah, because since it's fenced in and it can't escape, it's your das is on it. These are mutter without any act of hachana. Because minastam, the default position is that you have these animals in mind to use them for eating purposes if you need them on Yom Tov. Now, I would just point out that, again, this whole concept that that there's a potential problem of muktzah over here is only according to the shita of the Mechaber, that there's such a concept of muktzah on Yom Tov. Again, the Mechaber is the one who's machmir and holds that you would need hachana on a food item that's otherwise not considered muchan. If we're mekel on muktzah on Yom Tov, so then again, it's like the apple that's oimid l'schara. We're mekel in muktzah on Yom Tov. We hold that the apple that's oimid l'schara, that's set aside for business purposes, is not muktzah on Yom Tov, even though it's set aside for business purposes. Because if you really want an apple, you're going to eat the apple. So we don't have to come on to this, that the fawn is mistama daite alayu, l'chol shashe yitztarich. We don't have the muktzah problem in the first place. This orchard has to be located within 70 v'arba tfachim and 4 tfachim, so 70 and 2/3 of an amma. Why does it have to be close by? Because then if the pardes where the fawns are located are close by, so then your das is on them to eat them on Yom Tov. So then it's not muktzah, then it's minamuchan. The kevet shamakim karev. Since it's close by, Berurah is sometime, and you could see these fawns all the time. So they were never removed from your mind. But if we're talking about fawns that are in an orchard a long way away, so then if you were making them for Yom Tov use, they're not muktzah. But if you didn't do something to be making them, then they're considered muktzah because your das is not on them. They're very far away from you. The mother is always aser because it's not considered trapped because the mother could run away. We're talking about a large orchard. So that if you wanted to catch the mother, you would have to say, "Go bring me a trap." So the mother is not mechuseres tzeda. Even if the mother would become trapped on its own on Yom Tov, she still is aser because of muktzah. Because this it gets zimun. How was your act of hachana? How your act of hachana didn't do anything on the mother animal, because when Yom Tov began, this mother animal, your das couldn't have been on it. It wasn't minamukh. It could always escape. Okay, we're going to stop over here. B'yat Hashem, tomorrow we'll pick up with Sif Test. Thank you so much for joining me for Limud Torah. Be well.